Hey, good evening, people. And I hope it's not too noisy in the background. I got some like chatty neighbors. You know how it is. It's like evening time, people coming home from out shopping Saturday. Also, it's Pride weekend here, apparently. Anyways, so I was going to do a little thing about more specifically not just neutron decay cosmology, but sort of like the more the quantum components and fractional charges, quark fractional charge. That's like quark fractional charge. Let's say that's what this is about. Oops. So there, that would be one. And the premise of the quark fractional charge is that if you've watched any of my other videos, that if you were constructing, let's say we're going to construct a proton. This is a proton because it's got a mass and it has positive charge. So, and the way we constructed this was that we total improv. 2, 3, 4, 1. Yeah, let's make a proton. Oops. That's what we. Okay, so for a proton, we're going to take one up, 2 positive fractional charges, and the reason I make it like this is that imagine these are balls, but imagine really that this is more like a vortice, right? Like this is the open end, and this is the part that's going to be reaching out for a charge. And that this is just like the funnel part going into the center here. Okay, that's a better way of thinking about it. So there's one up quark, another up quark, 2 fractional charges, positive, positive voodoo, and then we take one of these, but we're going to use this, and this is going to cancel out each other. But a photon is made of a positron and an electron in a rotational situation. So let's make this into a photon, only a super, super high frequency, so intense photon that it gets trapped over its own gravity well, because energy does impinge on, has a gravitational curve, just energy. You don't need mass to make gravity evident. 2 incredibly high intensity laser beams will be attracted to each other because of their intensity, because of the way that they impinge on gravity and the curve between them. So we're going to take this, we're going to make it into a mass unit. Oh yeah. So we're going to shove that mass unit, and that's going to be in the middle, of course, because that's where mass would sit. And then surrounded by 3 axes of positive charge. Positive charge along every Cartesian coordinate. Isn't that nifty, the way that worked out, that like because we have 3 fractional charges, like 3 takes 3 fractional charges to complete sort of like a full charge, that it works out like that. It's just cool, don't you think? Anyways, so yeah, so this would be like a proton, right? But these are like vortices. This is the whole point. Okay, so I'm gonna switch over back to this, and this is like one of these axes. I know it's yellow, but we're gonna get to that anyways. So like that. So that's like 1 fractional charge. Then there's another fractional charge, and then there's another fractional charge. So now we have 3 fractional charges, and these are reaching out into space for reconnection, because They need to be satisfied as charges. Right. Okay, but let's just look at one for a second again. Now, if this was not just a funnel, but a vortice, there would be like a rotation, right? And it would be most intense. The angular momentum, I mean, not the angular momentum, but the vorticity and the speed would be like right there. This is the most intense point. This is where the surface of mass is. So what we have is like right. That's one of them. There we go. So that's 3 vortices, right? Each one a fractional charge. And in here, because of this, and I suggest that it's basically just gyroscopic resistance. That so you have this spinning, and so now you have spinning in 3 different dimensions. Let's maybe do it over here. So let's see. So let's just do one at a time. So this disc is spinning, right? Now, if you try and tip this thing sideways, it will twist and resist you and go 90 degrees to whatever you're trying to do to it because of that rotational momentum. We know this about gyroscopes. It's like they act wonky that way. So when you try and push on it, what it does is it rotates that way. That's one. But we have 3 of these. So we've got this one working that way. So whenever you try and move this object, you try and move it, you try and move it that way, and this rotates that way. And you try and move it that way, this one rotates that way. And then you try and move it that way, and this thing rotates that way. So what we have is gyroscopic resistance in 3 different dimensions, right? Now, that gives us mass. But I wonder if the thing about the generations and the Coide formula, the Coide relationship, is that there's a innate, most stable, low energy situation where there's an electron here, right? Now, what we know about the generations of electrons, electron, muon, tau, and the generations, but not the generations of neutrinos, is that even though they have higher, even though the muon and tau have higher masses, they don't have a greater charge than an electron. And therefore, that component is in a dimension, is in a very specific dimension. It's not in the charge dimension, whatever that is. It's in the rotational component of the electron dimension. So if this was just a regular, there's a most stable situation for these vortices. That's the electron, where it's just like, this is the lowest case scenario. So imagine we've got these 3 gyroscopes, and now we take it and we turn the entire thing 90 degrees to where it would usually sit, or some arbitrary angle, because dimensions get weird when you get into higher dimensions. But effectively, we move it like that. So it's like it's all in alignment, sort of, but there's this stress on the entire structure because it really wants to snap back to this most stable state. And then if you twisted it not once, but twice, so now it's like it's off kilter in two different directions. It really, really, really wants to snap back to most stable situation. As a way of thinking about the development of this as sort of like a real thing. And then as we look at that, we think, oh, so the snap back component, the flip rotation component of that. I mean, already in a previous video, I addressed sort of the neutrino as the spin. So let's say over here, we're going to make a neutron. Neutron is that we'll make it a double cover. There's a proton, and there's the electron forced back into the proton to make the double cover neutron. Neutron decays. What happens is essentially this one becomes radial forces instead of rotational force. It becomes radial, but therefore that rotational component gets flung off. And that rotational component is the neutrino. It's spinning in all three dimensions like this, but it doesn't have what I would call like a sink flow. Like an electron is the flow down into the hole that is a proton in my model, right? There we go. It's an actual flow down into that. The plus a vorticity, a rotational component as well, but it's a true sink. A neutrino isn't a sink at all. It's just this rotational component without the sink part. And then when it combines with a sink, then it gives it that rotational component. So as a way of thinking about the generation of like, how do we get inertia? How do we get inertia? Because there's sort of mass and there's inertia. And I think that they come differently because even energy can have mass, but it doesn't have the same rotational, locational, a proton is at a place. It's localized. Why is it localized? Because it's a bunch of stuff in a really, really tight orbital situation. Why is a photon not? Because it's spreading out all over the place. Neutrons and protons are extremely, truly localized. They are mass. And they resist being moved around. Why? Because both of them have this rotational component. And if we just take these dimensions as semi-real, then, as I said, it's like, let's say, better with this. There's one, there's two, there's three. So let's just say that like in the natural world, when there's an electron, the blue is up. But then we spin the whole thing. And now this thing is off kilter and really it wants to go back to its normal self. It wants to right itself. And then if you twist it 2 times, so that you'd have like another color on top, then it wants to right itself even more. And just as a way, I don't know, just thinking about why things are the way that they are and how they are that way. Yes. Okay, I'm going to stop now. That's enough pondering of rotation and mass and the evolution of mass, but it's just like get the gyroscopic component. This is just like purely a, I don't know, very Kelvin, very Kelvin, very Kelvin. Okay, peace out.